It's very important for you to remember. It's not the story that's telling your speech, but it's you that's telling the story that's having a speech versation. You're the one who's controlling it. That's very important. You're the one who's making the application. You're not just telling a blind story, but you're telling us why we're telling the story. You're connecting the story. You're making it come to life for us. It reminds me of the story of the famous violinist. He got up on the stage and he played an amazing piece. After the piece was over, he took his violin and he smashed it into 1,000,000 pieces. He said, "Listen, don't worry," he said. "I just wanted you to know that was just a cheap violin I found. A lot of people have been saying that it's the violin that's playing my music, but it's not. It's me who's playing this music. It's not the instrument, but it's the musician." He then pulled out his very nice Stradivarius violin, and he played an amazing piece. But what was interesting to the people was that what they heard before and what they heard now, it sounded the same. There wasn't any difference. They at least couldn't tell. They couldn't tell there was any difference. They needed to see it was the musician who was playing the music. It wasn't the violin that was playing the music. A lot of people think they can just rest on stories. I remember I was at a conference one time and the speaker got up, and you can tell it was a one-trick pony. He had one story that he was so proud of, that he was going to rely on and think that it made the entire speech. Even though the speech was long, he was going to use this one story. He was going to drag it out far too long and tell way too many details about the story. It is a great story. I've heard it before, but he didn't deliver right. He took a great story, and it had not half the effect it could have had just because the story was good. It did actually have a little bit of an effect on us. So, keep that in mind. If it is a great story, it still has some strength to it, but it's nothing compared to what you could do with the story. The story he gave was the story of the woodcutter, and it takes place in the forest, and it's about chopping down trees. And the moral of the story is the guy who cut down the most trees, he would regularly take time to sharpen his axe. And because of that, he chopped down way more trees and spent less time doing it. Whereas the guy who had a dull axe, who didn't take time to sharpen it, he wouldn't cut down near as many. Now, the story's great, and I just slaughtered it, just so I could tell it to you really fast. So you get the idea. But when he told the story, he spent way too much time on the details, saying, and he was cutting, and he was cutting. How he just spent too much time. Now, sometimes you can really focus in on the important details if you want to, but keep in mind that make room for other good stories. Make room for the application. Once he was done telling this long story, finally he told us, in a very quick way, the moral of the story is sharpen your skills. He could have spent more time on how to sharpen your skills by going back, referring back to the illustration, often using triggers. He could have done a way better job, but he just got lost in the details. He spent too much time on the details. He got lost in them. Or sometimes people give a story, and they'll make it too complicated. It will be something that a rocket scientist has to understand. Or, I will say, keep in mind your audience. If they are rocket scientists, then maybe you can tell the joke or the story, if it applies to them. But make sure you know your audience. And always remember you're always safer to tell a simple story. And don't discredit simple stories. Keep in mind that you can tell vivid pictures with very simple stories. Remember, it's not the violin, it's the player. You play that violin how you need to. Depending on who your audience is, you play it to them according to how you know they're going to hear it. The violin doesn't know that. It doesn't know who its audience is or how to play it. You know how to. Your story, it doesn't know who it applies to or how to apply it. You make the application. You pick the story. Remember, you're taking the lead. You're in charge here. For this moment, you're taking us on a journey. Take the responsibility. Step up.